Fabulous. Well, first of all, thank you for having me at UMBRAAD. This is my first time speaking, many time listener. Let's dive into it. I'm going to caveat this talk with saying, whilst I appreciate the importance of accessibility, I'm a latecomer to accessibility. So this is a impression of someone who's just picking up and catching up as fast as I can go along. So I may say some things which are a little bit out there, but then hopefully you're used to that with me. I don't know. What is accessibility? I'm sure everyone's defined at some point in time. I had my own little stab at it. The practice of designing environments and products and services so they can be used as many people as possible. Um, how does that sound to people? I think it's a fairly broad base, covers most things. It can obviously cover digital services and digital products and things like that. That is traditionally thought about in the context of accessibility, at a conference like UMBRAAD. But there are other parts of accessibility, physical accessibility, potentially cognitive accessibility, economic accessibility. So I'm going to try and approach this from a few different points of view. So let's hit the familiar common ground first. Digital accessibility, websites and apps that we're working with. This is just, ensure everyone can perceive, understand, navigate, and interact with the digital information. Um, this is making sure you can use a keyboard without using a mouse, forms, labels, and the screen readers can pick them up, that kind of thing. Color contrast, uh, all the stuff that there are many people out there who are more able and experienced than me to talk about. So I'll leave that one and move on to physical accessibility. For me, this is, designing your environment, the physical world around you, removing barriers, making sure that people can reach and operate, connect to, position themselves, carry, plug in, charge, maintain, or generally otherwise be comfortably use the technology that they need and in the environment that they need. So, for example, desks and workstations, adjustable doors for wheelchair users, power sockets, charging points, shared equipment where people can actually get to them, that kind of thing. Um, so that's physical accessibility. Cognitive was the third one that I kind of picked up. So this is designing information and tools so that they're easy to navigate, remember, understand. Breaking very large processes into small, easily memorable steps, reducing clutter, reducing distraction, unnecessary animations and interfaces. I'm very guilty of that with my slideshows, so I'll try and tone down the animations where possible. Consistent layout so people don't have to relearn navigation every screen. Things that can add cognitive load and be a barrier for people actually picking up and understanding something. Visual cues, yeah, for example, icons and next to text to kind of convey meaning. Pictures worth 1,000 words, and so on. And economic accessibility, and this is a probably one that isn't necessarily talked about a lot at accessibility conferences, but pricing your products and services so they're affordable to the greatest number of people. And a healthy market for resale and repair exists for those who aren't able to buy new. An appreciation ultimately that not everyone is in the same boat and not all your users are going to be using the latest and greatest flagship devices and flagship laptops. People are going to be using sometimes older technology. Sometimes you have kids or parents or grandparents who can't afford to buy new and they use hand-me-down devices, sometimes second or third hand, sometimes that are a few years old, potentially past their useful service life. They're no longer getting security updates, but they're still using these devices because it's important that they have access to these devices. The sort of things that people can do in here are, support tiered products, have a premium level of your software and have a basic level below that so that you don't necessarily get everything, maybe even a free tier before that. Um, Designing services, designing your devices so that they're repairable, and spare parts are available to it. So, it's all well and good buying a laptop, but then uh, I love Apple devices. I'm fully into the Apple world, but I also have PCs. And I've gone through the pain of having a broken MacBook Pro screen where it's basically not worth the price of repairing it. You'll spend the same amount of money and you may as well buy yourself a new MacBook Pro. That's, not necessarily the best thing to do. And supporting software devices with software and security updates long enough to make a second hand or third or fourth hand, a market actually worthwhile looking at. So, to kind of cover all of that, I wanted to tell the story of an old laptop. This laptop. It's been in our hands for quite a long time. We bought it in 2018. It has had a full useful life long before 2018. It had served its corporate overlords at some large corporation, and outlived its usefulness. So they sold it secondhand on eBay, and we needed a quick laptop. We'd just had child number 3, who you can see in the background. That child is now 9.5 years old. So it's a very different world that we live in. So yeah, I picked that laptop up to use to generally consume the internet, and just as I kind of having a spare one around the house. This is that same laptop today. It's a little worse for wear. Quite a lot of the lids and things are broken. You can see, bits of paint all over it where the children. It's now my son. It's the boy in the picture. It's his laptop now. It's gone through. My wife had it, then my eldest son had it, then my middle daughter had it, and now my youngest son uses it to, uh, under supervision, use games and so on, things on there. For anyone interested in the specs, it is an i5 6600 HQ, which is quite an old chip. I think it was released in 2015. It originally came with 8 gigs of RAM, which we upgraded. And I kind of wanted to demonstrate that, as old as that machine is, and even though it is officially and hasn't for a long time been supported, it is out of support in terms of Microsoft software. Microsoft will no longer support that, and Windows 10 is now end of life. So it is it's unsupported hardware. It's no longer actively maintained and supported. I was able to. I'm going to bring this up on a new page here. I do have audio in the background, but the audio doesn't do anything, so I'm just going to talk over it. I was able to fire it up, install Visual Studio Code. I went to everyone's favorite website, Paul Scher's package script writer, download the default script, fire it up and run it. Now, this is the bit where you'll generally stare at the screen for about a minute and a half, maybe even longer. So I'm just going to speed it up a little bit so that we're not waiting for too long. Because whilst it does the job and is able to run the code and it still works, it isn't fast. That isn't necessarily something that's of a negative for every scenario, because sometimes you don't need to have the fastest, the latest, greatest tools. You just need something that is able to do the job. So yeah, you'll see over here, I accidentally pressed Control C because the copy button doesn't work on the laptop anymore. So I had to relaunch and rerun the project. But I was able to fire up the site, use it in Visual Studio Code. It should get to there any second. And there we go. The clean starter kit running as it would do on my development machine, which is a lot more powerful than it. And I was able to also jump on and use ChatGPT, and I'd say, okay, whilst the machine itself isn't powerful, I can use cloud tools and cloud services. I can ask it to make a change. So I asked it to, put a hard-coded link to UMBRAAD in the footer. Fairly straightforward change, nothing too complicated. Yeah, I could have done that myself. I could have opened up the visual editor and gone to the partial and just hard-coded the link inside there. But I specifically wanted to demonstrate that, it isn't just necessarily the specific physical hardware on this machine. This is a 4-core machine. My development machine right now is a 16-core machine, so 4 times as many cores as this particular machine has. But it was able to run it, and it was able to launch the project. It was able to fire up my development tools, to run the SDK, all on top of Windows. um, make the change. There you go. It's made the change to the partial, and then it's added the hard-coded link to UMBRAAD. Therefore, come back over here, and there you go. There should be a link inside there. So, as a development tool, yeah, it's not great, but oh no, go on. There you go. It does a job, and that exact machine, you can pick it up now for very little money, and spare parts are available for it online. So the point here is that you don't necessarily need to think about and have and use the latest and greatest tools, and don't restrict yourself to the latest and greatest tools, because not all your users will be using the latest technology. Users will be using older stuff. Users will be using hand-me-down things. The developers may not have access to the latest technology. It's also very easy and very common, and everyone's guilty of this. It's not any one specific thing, but it's very easy to think about, well, surely everyone's got access to the same tools that I have. We are incredibly lucky living in the Western world that we have access to this kind of technology. There's a good secondhand market. The same device, if you tried to find it right now in Brazil, where there are huge import restrictions and availability of parts is much lower, you pay 3 or 4 times as much today. So you'd pay potentially $300 to $400 for that um, the same laptop, and in the same sort of condition. And it's not the kind of thing that I'd want to spend that kind of money on. For the tech geeks among us, a bit of comparison. So my machine on the top and that old laptop, it is a single core speed. It is roughly 32% of the speed of my machine, and in terms of multi-core speed, it's not even close. However, because a lot of what Umbraco needs to do when you're launching it through the SDK is waiting for NuGet to restore, launching local databases and so on. There's a lot of waiting around for that kind of stuff. So from starting up, from pasting that package script writer script to getting the site up, if the video I timed it's about 2 minutes 20, on my desktop is about half the time. But it worked. I was able to I was able to do the job. I was able to do what I needed to do on there. Why did that work? Why was I able to pick up hardware that's nearly 50, no, it's 20, 11 years old, 12 years old almost? Because standards, we have hardware standards in the same way that accessibility standards are there. So on that laptop, the CPU is built using the Intel x86 architecture standard. It uses standard double data rate RAM, so DDR4 RAM. Uh, it's actually one of the earliest laptops that used DDR4. It was right at the very start of DDR4. Now DDR5 is commonplace everywhere, and DDR4 is starting to become more and more obsolete. It uses the same buses that existed with PC hardware for a long time, and it uses the same hard drive systems and architectures that continue to be supported. So following and maintaining standards and looking for these standards allows you to kind of keep these devices in circulation and still kind of actively being used. There are people who would rather you didn't use old hardware, would rather you went out and bought new stuff. So Microsoft have dropped support. So that the CPU that's on that machine isn't officially supported. Microsoft dropped support for any CPU below the 8th generation of their Intel CPUs. But there are workarounds. There are smart, dedicated people out there who built tools to let you install Windows on older machines, and Linux is actually a viable alternative. I have used Linux on that machine, and it's a great little media consumption device. And if I had to use it as an emergency development device, I absolutely would be able to. But even at that price, the £100 or so that I paid for that device, it doesn't necessarily mean it's accessible to everyone. That price, if you're in the UK, we have a system called universal credit, where if you don't have work and you're a single person, the state will give you some money. And that amount is 338.58 if you're under 25. That's a monthly amount. That's what you get to live on for a month. that is not an even sum. And if you consider you've got to use that money for food, heating, travel, it it's a lot to spend on a device. So, there are other ways of getting devices. There are charities out there that can kind of pull these things together. And the key stat that I found from the UK government website is that, in today's society, in the UK today, 1.5 million still don't have access to a basic laptop or smartphone. And we're not talking about devices that are supported. Even older devices, even devices like that old laptop of mine aren't available to everyone. And there are 3.7 people living below a digital minimum standard. Now, this prevents people getting access to things like, forms for healthcare, information if they're sick or their parents or their children are sick, finding out, what medicine they need, staying in contact with people, human communication is a big part of our society. And the hardware isn't the only barrier, just because I have the hardware, I also need to have access to the internet. Maybe I can use it at home, but using it, if I have to go to a cafe every time I want to use the internet, that's a very different scenario. Maybe I don't have access to training materials. The world is a very open place right now, and information is everywhere. So there's misinformation everywhere. Um, you need to be able to kind of get to the right things and know what you're looking for and have access to a range of information. Otherwise, it's not a good situation. And AI, something that I touched on with my little demo earlier. Although I can use it, there is a cost associated with them. There's a free tier for a lot of these, but those are potentially not going to stick around forever. They're massively subsidized right now, where these large companies are growing the market for AI, but maybe free tiers will disappear in the future. And then you kind of get an even wider disparity between the people who have access to these tools and people who don't have access to these tools. And repairability, that's a big part of, hardware and maintaining hardware and maintaining accessibility to hardware, making sure people have the ability, even if they don't have the means to buy the latest technology, if I can repair it, or if I can take it to someone who is skilled and is able to repair it, then that means that somebody else can use that device. Any old laptops that we no longer use, um, we take them to their charities, which will take them and use them and give them to schools or give them to anyone who needs them, really, basically, both within the UK and outside the UK. You can kind of have a look around for all these things. The device matters, but it depends. The hardware matters, but also is reliant on services. So the availability of the hardware is one part of it, but you need those services. You need internet. You need email. You need to be able to kind of access these things in a way. But there is good news. People, that hardware that I used, which wasn't expensive, is still going to be working for many years to come. And as long as spare parts are available, I can't see any reason it would stop working. It should continue to do anything it needs to do. Um, the cost of getting online is getting lower and more widely available. Repairability is becoming a really focused thing. Even Apple, their latest MacBook Neo, which they released this year, is one of their more repairable laptops. This is the most repairable. It still has a fused display. So if the display is damaged in any way, you basically have to throw away the entire top assembly and buy a new one. But it's better than it used to be. But there are manufacturers like Framework out there who actually make fully repairable laptops, and you can today buy a Framework laptop. Sorry, you could today buy a replacement motherboard for the first original Framework laptop that they released some 8 or so years ago. And it still works perfectly well. Just slot into it and carry on working. And people are fighting for making sure hardware, tools, and software and software and the services that we need are available. I kind of wanted to end on this note that, if we want more people to learn, to build and work and participate, accessibility has to not just be the user interface, but actually a consideration at the entire stack, not just at the UI part of it, but, consider how will people access devices? Where will they be accessing your information? Where will they be seeing your things? And yeah, that's my talk. Thank you very much.